Hello, 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 and welcome to the Jenna Banks Show. I am Jenna, your host, and I am all about helping you live life to your fullest potential. My guest today is Jennifer Rogers, and I cannot wait to introduce you to her. Her story is absolutely phenomenal, inspiring, heartbreaking. It's so many things. So let me just tell you, she is absolutely incredible for what she's done in the business world. She started a company that was able to achieve almost $1 million in sales within its first year of business. Not only that, but now she's speaking around the country, motivating women to be the best versions of themselves. And she's on a government contract. Now, get this. The same government body that hired her and put her on a contract to speak around the country, where she's speaking in prisons and women's facilities like that, is the exact same government body that put her in prison for 2 years. That's right. When she was young, she ended up being convicted on a felony charge and was put away in maximum security prison for a time for drug possession, drug dealing, all of that. She was heavily addicted to drugs and went on to succeed despite that felony conviction, despite losing custody of her daughter during that time that she was in prison. This woman has so many hurdles, or has had so many hurdles to overcome, and has succeeded unbelievably despite all those challenges. And so I feel like you're going to be hopefully so inspired by her story, like I was, and like so many other women are now inspired by her journey. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate having you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I am really excited for people to get to hear your very inspirational story. I mean, it is so unique. I've truly never met anybody like you in my life. And I am so incredibly inspired by you, your background, your story. And so I feel like a good place to start to introduce everybody to you is maybe to share a little bit about your background. How about some of the work you're doing today? Maybe that's a great place to start. You're working with women or prisoners in general.
Mhm.
And right now you're going around and speaking in these prisons, right?
Yes. So I am contracted with the government and I go around inside of federal prisons all over the United States and I speak to the women that are incarcerated. And, my message varies, but it's very woman led. And, it's just to inspire hope and to let these women know, hey, it doesn't matter what you've done in your past. Your past doesn't define you, your passion does. And I talk to them about how to recreate who they are as women and how to use this situation that they found themselves in as a stepping stone to get them forward in life.
That's amazing. So, wonderful work you're doing. I feel like it's so necessary. For some reason, I shouldn't say for some reason, I've been very drawn to helping those who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated in the past, who are now trying to find their way in life. I feel like there's so much work to be done there, and I'm so grateful for you for doing the work that you're doing, because just because we've made a mistake, whether it's related to crime or drugs or whatever, drug use, drug possession, drug dealing, whatever it is, we can learn from our mistakes and moved on. And just because we've received a jail sentence or a prison sentence doesn't necessarily mean you should now forever pay the price for the rest of your life.
Right.
You can learn from that lesson and move on. So tell us a little bit more about why you got inspired to get into this in the first place.
Okay. Well, I did prison time. When I was 22 years old, I got indicted by the feds for selling methamphetamines. And basically, I got addicted to methamphetamines when I was 17 years old. I was a senior in high school. And I was captain of my co-ed all-star cheerleading squad in Miss Armurchie High School. And I got addicted to drugs. And I was going to school and living this double life high every day. And, it compounded over the years, and it went from just a drug addiction to a life of crime. And I had a daughter that I ultimately lost custody of as a result of that. When I was young, I had her at 19, and I lost custody of her when I was 21 years old. And a year later, I ended up in federal prison, and I was sentenced to a 2-year sentence
Wow.
in the
That's a
feds. Yeah, it was a long time. And,
yeah.
I was actually supposed to have gotten sent to a minimum security camp, and I actually ended up getting sentenced to a maximum security federal prison.
So
So,
who are the types of inmates at these maximum security facilities?
the one that I was at, it was a detention center on the women's side. On the men's side, they house like true max, like they could have had violent crimes or anything like that. On the
Mm.
women's side, you had to have 3 years or less to be there. So a lot of women were transitioning towards the end of their sentence, and they got sent there, or they would have been like me, who had less than 3 years on their sentence, and they were sending them there because the camps were overcrowded.
Oh.
So, it ranged. I mean, there were some older women in there that were in there for money laundering, but most of the younger women that were close in age range to me were in there for drug trafficking.
Mm,
And,
mm.
and that's what their sentences were primarily for.
Did they provide you with any type of counseling or classes, courses, anything like that?
They did. The one thing that they did provide was counseling. And
Mhm.
that was a very important key factor in my success in my life, because it allowed me to unpack a lot of the traumas that I had in my life, and to forgive myself and to forgive other people, and to be able to move on from that. But outside of that, that prison had absolutely no programs.
Mm.
And it was very unfortunate, because in that environment, with it being a max, your controlled movement, you lock down 3 times a day, you lock down at night, and it was hard.
Yeah.
And given the confinement of that, there was no outlet, there was no outside yard, there was no sunlight, and it was inhumane, to be very
Mhm.
honest with you. And I use that time in my life to work on me, and to figure out who is Jennifer Rogers outside of being a drug dealer and being a drug addict. Like, what do I want out of my life? And what are the things that I enjoy? And who makes me, or what makes me who I am? And
Mm.
so I use that time to really get to know myself on a personal level, outside of all of the factors that I had created in my life that led me to that point. So now, in the prison systems under the First Step Act, they are offering a lot of programming for inmates, which is a really great thing that they are doing. A lot of the prisons have colleges, they have cosmetology school. Several of the prisons that I've been to more recently, they do offer lots of programming. The previous prison that I was just at, they have a public speaking class where they teach the women how to be
Wow.
public speakers. So, there is a lot that they offer them now, and that's something that has just started within the last year. So really happy about that. But prior to that, people that were incarcerated, I mean, it was up to you to figure out
Wow.
what you were going to do in your own life, and how to bypass your time in prison.
So, the show is about, the shameful stories that we have, and getting beyond them and really owning those stories. How did you feel while you were in prison about this story now that was part of you? What was going through your mind? Did you think, "Oh my gosh, what's going to be the rest of my life? I've lost my daughter. What about my
Mhm.
career?" Any of that? What was running through your head at that time?
I think my career was probably the last thing that was on my mind. It was more about my daughter, and the fact that I had lost her custody of her. And, she was the only person or thing that I ever really loved or knew how to love, because it was just a different type of love. And I struggled with that. And a lot of the counseling that I went through was a result of that situation, and then just broken things that had happened in my own childhood. And, I did think a lot about what would my future look like. I didn't really know what it was going to look like, but I had just decided that I was determined to make a great future for myself, regardless of what had happened in my past. You go through so many stages of guilt, when you're in a situation like that and you think of all of the lives that you've damaged, your family members, the people that you've hurt. And so it's a process. It is a process to unpack all of those things and to really forgive yourself so that you can move forward in life.
I love that you mentioned that forgive yourself.
Hmm.
That's a big one.
It is, and it's hard. And to be honest with you, I probably didn't fully forgive myself up until more recently in the last 6 months regarding the situation with my daughter.
Yeah, I can imagine. And anybody listening or watching right now, if you've held on to a story like that, regardless of what it is, and so many of us have so many different types of stories,
Mm.
and it's not unusual to hold on to it for a long time, but at some point, you really have to forgive yourself
Yeah.
if you want to get anywhere and move on and have a new story for your life.
Yeah, and it's so true. And sometimes you don't even realize that you haven't forgiven yourself
Mhm.
because I honestly thought that I had. And it wasn't until I went to an inner child healing session that I realized that I truly had not forgiven myself for
Yeah.
what I had done in her life.
Yeah. So for anybody who hasn't done the inner child work, Jennifer and I both highly recommend doing it.
Mhm.
It is a game changer, y'all. Like seriously, and that can take on different types of forms of
Yeah.
healing. It could be from a therapist. It could be from a coach. It could be from a book. There are plenty of self-help books out there. I
Hmm.
personally read Mastin Kipp, who he focuses on trauma work specifically. So he has a book out called Claim Your Power, but I do believe he has other books as well and courses, and he does coaching too. But any type of past trauma work is so beneficial,
Hmm.
whatever the trauma is, whether it was childhood trauma and you'd be surprised. And I don't know if you come across this in your work, Jennifer, but some people's trauma, come to find out, doesn't necessarily have to be a big trauma. It
Right.
could be something small, like your mother said something to you or a teacher said something to you as a child and it just stuck with you and you formed a belief about yourself because of it. you know
Yes. Yeah, that
yeah
is so true. And that was part of what my session, some of the things that came out in my session. But what it allowed me to do was it allowed me to connect to my child self and to understand myself better and why I did some of the things that I did in my life.
yeah, and then to come to that place of forgiveness for yourself
Hmm.
is so important. So I'd love to get on to um, some of the work you did after you got out of prison. So you said to yourself, I'm going to be determined
Hmm.
to make a good life for myself, a better life for myself. While you were in prison, you came to this
Yes.
conclusion.
Yep.
And so that sense of determination stuck with you as you got out. Then what did you do?
So I got out to a federal halfway house in Atlanta, Georgia, and there was a company that had an ad in the AJC for phone sales. And I had done phone sales actually when I was in the middle of my addiction. So I knew that it was something that I was good at. So I used an illegal cell phone that I wasn't supposed to have. Everybody in the halfway house, we had them hidden in the ceiling tiles because back then they didn't allow you to have them.
Yeah.
And so I used that cell phone and I called the company and I did a phone interview and they wanted to bring me in for an in-person
Wait.
interview
You did this while you were still in prison?
in the halfway house.
Oh my God,
Yes.
Jennifer. So
Yes.
that is determination for you.
Yes, it is. And in the halfway house is kind of like a work release program. It's like the next step. You've gotten released from prison. You're still considered an inmate, but it's a more relaxed environment. So you
Okay.
do have the ability to go to work. So I get this interview and then I have to go and convince the halfway house director, to let me go. And he's like, Miss Rogers, how did you get that interview? And I was like, I called from the payphone. And
Uh-huh.
he was like, yeah, right. And so he ended up letting me go. And it was the first time that I had ever ridden public transportation because where I'm from, that does not exist. So I am taking the train and buses and I'm following these maps and these routes. And it was just so exciting because I was so excited to be alive and to be free and to have an opportunity to recreate whoever I wanted to be. And so I go into that interview And I've got, I'm dressed up in a suit and a business suit. And they had never hired a woman in Atlanta before. And this was 11 and a half years ago. And I go into the interview and it's going great. And I knew that they were going to hire me because I had made my mind up before I went in there that there would be nothing that could stop me
I
in my
love that. And
life.
I want to highlight that because I think that is so important.
Hmm.
Determination, believing in yourself, it matters.
It does. It does. And that stemmed from when I was incarcerated. I actually got locked in solitary confinement for 3 weeks,
Oh,
and there was no shower, and they fed me through a hole in the door, and the lights were on all day, and they would just come by and stare at you in the window and just look at you like you were just this caged animal. And it was for something that I did not do. I was under investigation, and they ended up releasing me 3 weeks later. But I remember the first week that I was in there, I felt like I was going to lose my mind.
yeah.
And once I conquered my mind in that setting, I told myself then that there is nothing that I cannot do or accomplish in my life. If I can conquer myself here in these terrible, inhumane conditions, there is nothing that I can't accomplish. And so I just took that same attitude and mentality with me into every opportunity that I was presented with.
Mm.
And so I got in there. We're going in the interview and and it's going very smoothly. But I wanted to be honest about who I was. And, I was institutionalized. I have been in prison in a max for 2 years. So I was very raw in my delivery and how I spoke for the most part. You never would have known that I had been to prison if I didn't tell you. But I interrupted the guy and he's dressed up, suit, tie. And I said it just like this. I said, I just want to be honest with you about who I am. I just got out of a maximum security federal prison. I was a drug dealer and a drug addict, and I'm not that person anymore, but I'm going to make somebody a lot of money.
I love it.
And his jaw hit the floor. And he didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what to say because I literally had laid my cards on the table at that point, and we're literally staring at each other. And he finally breaks the silence, and I'm going to use he said, "Holy shit, I was not expecting that." And then he laughed, and then I laughed, and they ended up hiring me. And 6 months later, I was traveling the country, opening up offices for that company, training people on how to sell over the phone.
How did it feel when you in that moment did that? That's your first time ever doing anything like that. You just laid all your cards out on the table. Did it feel weird? Did it feel empowering when you did it?
I think at that point, because I was so high on life and just being free, that I didn't care. It did feel empowering, and it was like a release. It was like to
Yeah.
be able to just say, you know what, I'm not hiding behind this. This is who I am, and you can accept me or not, but if not, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to
Yeah.
keep going. And they
Take it or leave
accepted it.
it.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
they took it, and I ran with that opportunity, and I out called everybody, and I outsold, and I outworked, and I was excited to show up there every day. The base salary when I started was $2,400 a month, and here I am 2 weeks out of prison, a convicted felon, and that was the most legal money that I had ever made.
Wow.
And so I was like, I thought I was rich. Like you could, and I went in there like I was making $1 million every day, just excited to be
Mm,
there. And
mm.
so I just showed up as my best self every day because I was determined that
Yeah.
I was going to prove to the world, to my family, to my past, but most importantly, to myself
Yeah.
that I was worthy of the opportunity that I had been given.
That's key right there. You were worthy of it and you
Yes.
felt worthy of it.
Yes.
That's powerful. That's really powerful, Jennifer. And also, what I love is you just owned your story
Hmm.
right out the gate. Right out the gate. You never once gave it power over you,
Right.
hiding behind it, shamefully not telling that story, hoping people don't find out. And here you just said, "Hey, I did this. And not only just saying, oh, I was a prisoner. I did wrong. I was dealing
Right.
drugs. I was doing drugs, but I'm not
Mm.
that person anymore. This
Yep.
is who I am. And I am capable of this. And I can do this. And I'm going to be a rock star for you guys because if I can get through that, I can get through anything. And I
Right.
think that's a wonderful way to kind of turn that story around into a story of resilience. Who has that story? That makes you unique. I love
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, and that's what I tell these women when I talk to them in the prison. I tell them, I say, you are a woman. Like, you have the ability to give life. You are powerful. You have something on the inside of you that can birth things. And I
Yes.
was like, so birth yourself,
Mm,
birth a new you. Walk out of here. You were trusted with this story. You were trusted with it. There are other people that would never make it a day in the life that you have lived through.
yep.
So be empowered by that and use it to further your life. Don't use it
Yeah.
to feel like, I'm damaged as a result
Victim.
of it. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you are the prime example
Mhm.
of owning that story and working it to your advantage. I mean, look at where you are today. You went beyond that job and you went on to do other amazing things, including starting your own company. And now you're
Mhm.
speaking. You have a government contract. That's an
Mhm.
interesting situation. Here
Right.
you were imprisoned by the government, and
And
then the
now they're
government
paying
hired
me,
you.
and they're paying me to talk about it.
Exactly. Reminds me of
Yes.
that Catch Me If You Can movie where
Mhm.
Leonardo DiCaprio also went and turned what was his role? He was a not informant, but he worked on behalf of the government to help them catch other high-level criminals. I mean, same thing, you know?
Right.
So tell me, I'd love to get a little bit deeper into your story if you don't mind. So you had that job
Mhm.
and then you went on to do what afterwards?
Well, I want to touch on this before I get to that. So, while I was working there, an opportunity presented itself where I could fight custody of my daughter.
Oh,
Yes. So, I had been home, I think 2.5, maybe 3 years at the time. And, that was something that I had wanted for so long. It was something that I had prayed about and written about and thought about consistently.
pardon me for interrupting, but I just wanted to give a little context here. Were you able to visit with your daughter while you were in prison?
No.
Not at all.
No,
Oh, oh.
her father and his wife cut my communication. I was able to see her right before I turned myself in, and that was
Mm.
because the judge basically made them allow me to see her. And so I saw her for those 4 days before I went in, and they were adamant about the fact that, oh, we're going to let you have a relationship with her. And so when I first got in, and I was actually sentenced to where she lived at. So
Mm.
I got convicted in Georgia. She lived in Washington State, and that's where I got sent to prison at.
Wow.
Yes.
Coincidental. And yet they wouldn't even come bring her to see you. Oh.
No, no.
Mm.
And when I first got in, they were allowing us phone calls, and then they ended up cutting off all of my ties and communication. I would write her letters, I would send her
Oh.
cards, and they would refuse them and send them back to me. And it was a very difficult time in my life to
Yeah.
go through that because it was hard enough as it was,
Yeah.
and so I go through that, and then I'm presented with this opportunity to fight for custody of her, and I honestly wasn't sure that I was ready to really
Mhm.
have her back because I was still in the process of regaining my own life and my own
Yeah.
self-confidence. And I decided to move forward and fight for her. And she had been living with me for 6 months temporarily during this custody fight. And I ended up winning. And
Wait, you won full custody?
I won full custody.
That is amazing.
Yes, but she had been conditioned to believe for so long that I was this terrible
Bad
person.
person. Yeah.
Yes, and so she hated me and she didn't trust me,
Mm.
and I will never forget when I got back from Washington State from fighting for her, and I spent every dollar that I had saved in my bank account fighting for her, and she just very matter of factly looked at me with disgust when I told her that she was going to be living with me. And she was like, I cannot believe that my dad let this happen.
Oh,
And I just had to go in my closet and shut the door and cry because that was not how I imagined
yeah.
it would be when I finally was able to be reunited with my daughter.
Yeah.
So it was hard, and we went to therapy, and the
Yeah.
therapist quit on us, and there was just nothing that anyone could do. I mean, it was a difficult time.
How old was she at this time?
She was 7.
Okay. Wow. So
Yeah,
she
she
was
was
very
7.
opinionated at such a young age.
Yes.
My goodness. My goodness. So what a battle. You've had a lot of
Yeah.
battles to deal with in your life.
Yeah, yes, and it was very difficult, and
Mhm.
then, I ended up having a son, and she was 12 when I had my son, and I remember her, she had been with me at that point for 5, 6 years,
Mm.
and she made a comment that she was going to have to raise my son because I didn't know how to be a mother.
Wow. I'm what?
Yeah, and it was so upsetting because it's
Mm.
like, you've been with me for half of your life now,
Yeah.
and I I don't understand how you don't think that I know how to be a mother. So, but it was just the things that had been ingrained in her
Yeah.
mind for so long. And so now I have my son. She sees me being a mother, and it kind of messes with her a little bit because she doesn't
Mm.
understand. Now she's trying to unpack everything that had been taught to her.
Right.
It's not lining up with what she sees. And so
Right.
she started to come around a little bit after that. And then after I had my son, I ended up just getting to a place in my life where I felt like I needed a change. Like I was highly successful from a financial standpoint. I was making $200,000 a year. I had houses, I had cars, I have a condo in Florida. I had bought all the things, but I was so unfulfilled in my life, and I just knew that there was something bigger for me out there. And so I ended up interviewing with a company called Cabbage, which is a fintech company here in Atlanta,
And
American
that's
Express.
Kabbag,
Yep,
right? Yes.
yep,
Uh-huh.
yep. And Amex actually recently bought them out.
Oh, they did. Oh,
They did.
wow.
Yep, they did.
Huge.
So I worked for them, and I remember in my third and final interview with one of their founders, Catherine Petralia, and she is known around the world for finteching, or for pioneering fintech, basically, and for women.
Mhm.
So I'm in this interview, and I knew that my background was going to come up. And by now, I'm a little more poised than when I got out of prison. And so I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to bring this up in this interview. And I just prayed about it. I'm like, just to let it happen organically. If
Yeah.
I'm meant to be here, just open the door so that I can just walk through it. And so she asked me, the third question that she asked me was, if there is one mistake that you regret in your life, what is it and why? And so I started at 13 years old, and I told her my entire life story,
Oh
and
my.
and I talked for an hour and a half, and she was literally leaned in eating her snack, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm watching a Lifetime movie." She's
Yes.
like, "I cannot wait till you're, to the point where you're sitting in front of me today." And so once I got done, she put her paperwork down and she said, "I don't have any more questions, but when can you start?"
Amazing.
Yes. And so I excelled very quickly there. I built out several of their sales
What were
teams.
you doing there, Jennifer?
So I initially, what I was doing was I was a sales rep. So I was working with business owners that had qualified for a loan for their business, but they hadn't pulled the funds yet. So
Mhm.
my job was to call the business owners and talk to them and get them to pull the loan,
So
basically.
basically make them money, lots of
Yes,
money. Mhm.
yes, yes.
Which,
So
by the way, anyone watching this now, if you don't know what you'd like to do in life, you don't have a career trajectory yet, and you have any inkling for sales, get into sales because there's
yes,
really good money to be made there.
there is.
And regardless of your history, your past, if you can make a company money, that's your golden ticket.
Yes, it
Just
is.
saying.
It really is. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the one thing that, I'm so good at selling over the phone. Like I could cold call for the rest
Yeah.
of my life if I had to, and I enjoy doing it. So when I went to Cabbage, I just brought my same work ethic from Benchcraft Company, and we were cold calling businesses and selling them ads over the phone and getting their credit cards. And so
Which
when
is
I
not easy,
it's
right? Like
it's not, unless you have confidence and you know
right.
what you're doing.
That's right.
And I was great there. And so when I left
Mhm.
there and I go to Cabbage, I'm working warm leads. And so I'm like,
Mm.
oh, this is
That's
so
easy.
easy.
Yes.
Yes. And so I was just killing it. I mean, I think my quota the first month, full month on the phone, was 1.475 million. I did 2.2 million my first month on
Amazing.
the phone. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, so I got promoted there pretty quickly. I built out two of their sales teams, and things were going really great there, but I was still unfulfilled.
Okay.
And it was because I knew that I was called to a higher purpose, prison reform particularly. And I had started doing some speaking engagements actually then with
Oh.
the Department of Justice.
Oh.
And yes,
Wait, how did
and
you land that?
so when I had a 2-week gap between Benchcraft Company and Cabbage, and
Mm.
I had always known that I wanted to do that. And so I just reached out to the halfway house and I was like, hey, and they knew who I was because I had hired some people at Benchcraft Company.
Okay.
From the halfway house. So
Mm.
they were like, I told them, I was like, I've got some time, in my schedule. I'd love to come speak to the women and volunteer, my time. And the lady that I spoke with, she was like, actually, we have a panel on Tuesday. She was like, I know it's short notice, but would you be willing to come sit and speak on the panel because we need a woman on the panel? So I was like, yeah, of course. So
Of course.
I
Naturally.
right. I have no idea what I'm walking into. I just know that I'm sitting on a panel to speak, and I did. And afterwards, the woman that put it on, her name is Dr. Danielle Wiley. She's actually the outreach coordinator for the DOJ here in Atlanta.
Oh.
And she came to me and said, I've been looking for a woman speaker. We want to work with you. And I was going to volunteer my time to do it because I was just so passionate about helping other people. Well, they ended up getting funding for it. And so there was a group of us, and the exact same people that put us in prison, which was the Department of Justice, were
Mm.
now paying us to speak about it. So we were going around with this program called Real Talk About the Law. And I was speaking in schools and to housing authorities and workforce people, talking to them about, second chance hires and second chance housing and all of that.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Amazing work. And I love that you had this passion pretty early on in your life. And once you have that, once you know how you can give back, that you
Mhm.
just can't turn back.
Right. And it's interesting because, and I left this part of the story out, but while I was at Benchcraft, I had opened an all-star cheer gym, and it was a very successful gym. And that was something that I always wanted to do. And I had my daughter, and I opened it so that she would have an outlet. But see, no one at that gym knew my background. So once I
Mm.
had talked about it at Benchcraft, I was kind of open about it for a while. But the more success that I found, the less I talked about it, the less I wanted to identify with it. But I always knew that I was called to do something with it. And so
Mm.
I had a conversation with this woman who was a pastor at the gym one day on the other side, on the fitness side. And I was like, I built this very successful gym, and I know that I'm called to do something with my story, but I'm afraid to tell my story because I
Mm.
don't want to lose my business as
Yeah.
a result. And she's very matter of factly said, you're not afraid that you're going to lose your business. She said, you're still ashamed of your past. And until
Mhm.
you get on the other side of your shame, your story cannot be used as the powerful
Mm.
testimony that it is.
So true. Oh my
Yes.
goodness. Yes.
Yes. And so I literally sat on that for like a week and a half, and I got on Facebook Live one night and I told my entire story for 2 hours. I was on Facebook. Like, all my gym parents were on there. And at that point, I just no longer cared
Yeah.
about the opinions of other people because I knew that there was a lost and hurting world out there that would benefit from hearing a story of triumph, a story of
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. And so once you did that, how did that feel?
Oh, it
But
felt so good.
okay.
It was
That's what I
like
would imagine.
Yeah, it was like a release. It was like a weight off of my shoulders because
Yeah.
I was finally standing in my truth. This
Yeah.
is who I am.
Yeah. It's powerful.
It
And
is.
because you're never going to not have that story be part of you. So you
Right.
might as well own it. And when you start to
Yeah.
hide it, so at first you owned it when you got out there and got that job at Benchcraft. And
Mhm.
then you started to find success. And then you opened this gym while you were at Benchcraft, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So wow, that's a lot of work. You were a
Mhm.
busy person. But
Mhm.
then you started this gym and became successful with that. And now you're starting to hide behind the story, and
Mhm.
it's starting to take power over you. So you reclaimed that power.
Yep.
And now there was no turning back because you did it publicly.
Correct. Yep. And then from there, it just continued. Doors just started to open up. So I moved. I go to Cabbage, and then I actually went to a sales conference with Cabbage one evening. Put it on for all of the women, and there were these two guest speakers there, and they had left their high level positions within companies. They were at C-level and started their own businesses, consulting and whatnot. And I remember asking one of the women, I was like, how did you know what your thing was? And she says to me, I just loved developing young corporate America. I loved seeing young college educated kids get out with their degree and climb up the ladder and turn into these big C-level executives. She's like, I just love doing that. So she created a consulting company that helped individuals do that. And when she was telling me, I was like, I hate that part of what I do. I hate going into work every day and managing and coaching young individuals that I felt like were slightly unmotivated sometimes, and not all of them, but some of them were. And it was like, I want to work with people that I can identify with. I want to work with women that are like me, that are desperate for an opportunity, desperate for a second chance.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to provide them the same path that I was given, because I know that that's the anomaly. It's not the norm.
Yeah.
And so I literally went home that weekend and I sat down and I just brainstormed and I wrote everything that came to my mind. And I was like, okay, how have I become successful? How have I made money? And it was calling over the phone sales, cold calling, call centers, building sales teams. And what is it that I'm passionate about? And it was women, prison reform, women in prison, women getting out of prison. And so I formed the National Association of Women's Prison Reform, which is my first company. And I created this advertising product because remember, 8.5 years of my background were in advertising. So I created an advertising product, niche market, and I knew that it would be successful, high profit margins, but I knew I would need funding to do it. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to sit on this and I'm going to figure out the funding part. But in the interim of that, I went and I talked with Catherine at Catherine Petralia. And I just told her, I was like, hey, I am starting a company. Is there any advice that you can give me? And she was like, you do not need advice from me. She was like, you have been through way more things that I could ever overcome in my life. She's like, but if you need anything or if I can help you in any way, please let me know. So they had created an outsourced contract to cold call. And it failed. But the reason that they believed that it was successful, because I did a test on it and it was successful. So when I got to thinking, and I'm like, okay, they had this contract. I knew why it failed. The projections were wrong. The numbers were off. They were skewed. And so it's like, but I know that I can build a team and make this successful.
Now, how did you all know all this? I just want to backtrack for a second. Did you go to college?
No, I didn't even graduate high school.
So how far did you get in high school?
About 60 days from my senior graduation, and I got arrested and my first felony drug charge, and I was not allowed to graduate, so I dropped out and got my GED.
Yeah. GED here too.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. All right. So you got a college education in prison.
Yes.
Prison education.
Yeah, exactly. I got
college.
I got life college.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So you gave her this pitch.
Yep. And she said, so I got thinking about it. And so I go back to her and I was like, you guys have outsourced cold calling, actually twice. And it didn't work. But the reason that you believe that it would work was a test that I did and I was successful at it. And before I could even finish my sentence, she finished it for me and said, yes, we will outsource and give you a contract.
Nice.
So they donated laptops and they gave me this contract, which basically was the keys to me opening my company.
And everyone that worked for you was an ex-prisoner?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Wow, it's amazing. What a wonderful way to give back.
Yes. So I had, a call center, and it was women, and we were working the cabbage contract. And I mean, we were
Mm.
just killing it. I mean, we were killing the numbers. We were overachieving our quotas.
How did that feel to you to work with these women and give them the same opportunities that you were given? What did that do for you and what did that do for them?
It was the highlight and one of the most joyful times of my life.
Yeah.
To be able to wake up every day and to walk in to a room of women who feel empowered because you believe in them,
Mhm.
but who also have the same stories. And they weren't just my employees, they became my friends. And I mean, to this day, they're my friends.
Yeah.
And, it was just, it woke me up. It got me out of bed every single day with joy in my heart and a smile on my face, because I knew that all of the years of my life were no longer in vain,
Yeah.
that I had turned it into something great. So we're moving wonderfully. I decide to open up a second leg of my organization with the advertising product that I had
Mm.
created.
Mm.
So now, and we've gotten some other little sprinkled in contracts. We did voice over IP for a company out of New York. We had walk in bathtub appointment setting in Texas.
Hmm.
Yeah, we did a little bit of it. We mixed in a couple of different things in there. And so now I've got the advertising room, I've got the cabbage room, and my company was projected to do $1 million its first year.
Wow, that's
And that
amazing.
and that was March of last year, and then COVID hits and shuts
Mm.
everything down.
Oh, that's such a bummer for so many women-owned business, so many businesses in general. I'm sorry to hear that.
It was hard. And, so with Cabbage, they didn't secure funding for the year. And any corporate company like that, their outsourced contracts were the first thing they were cutting. And
Yeah.
so we were cut from Cabbage, and our advertising product was only local in
Mm.
Atlanta, Georgia at the
Oh,
time.
no.
And we were in quarantine. They had shut us down.
Oh, I
And
remember. Yeah.
yeah, and so it was like I had nothing, and I'm like, I didn't know what I was going to do. And now I'm also having to be a stay-at-home mom and a teacher of 2 kids, and
Oh my gosh.
I found out very quickly I am not made for that life. Like,
I don't think a lot of people are.
no, like, more power to these teachers that deal with these
Yeah.
children. That's not for me. And,
Yeah.
you realize, like, I really don't know my kids from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, every
Yeah.
single day. It was hard. And I'm also sitting here trying to brainstorm of how to bring my company back to
How to
life.
save the business, how to get
Yes.
everyone paid.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I literally just sat down and I'm like, okay, I've got this great advertising product. It's all over the phone, anyways.
Mm.
So why don't we take it nationwide? We're sitting at home. Everybody's sitting at home. It is the perfect time to call into our niche, into our host niche. And we did. So, 2 of the girls that were with me, that started with me, we all sat on the phone and we just cold called into our niche market. And we were sitting on 30 new contracts
Wow.
yes. And
Wow. Way to hustle. Way to
yeah,
pivot there.
yeah. And so we started back up in July, and I had new hires, and it was a brand new baby of a business.
This
And
was July 2020.
yes,
So that was a quick pivot
it
because
was.
we were locked down for what, from March through April or something like
Yeah,
that. And
April,
then
May. Yeah. Yep.
and everything is still not operating anywhere close to normal.
Right.
So that was
Right.
a very fast pivot.
It
Wow.
was, it was, and we were still working. We were doing it from home. So when I started, I started bringing revenue back in during that time. But when I started back up in July, I literally started up my company. Like, I hired new people. I've got new women starting. We're back in the office. We're feet on the grounds. Like, we're in the trenches. It's go time. Like, we've got some making up to do. And we started, I actually think we started on a Wednesday, and instead of Monday we started Wednesday. And Saturday morning my daughter wakes up with a headache, and she's throwing up and her neck is hurting.
Oh no.
And she was very sick. And so I Googled her symptoms. They were consistent with meningitis. So because of that, I took her to the emergency room and found out that she's got a ruptured brain aneurysm.
Oh my God.
Yes. So, here I am 3 days into opening up this brand new baby company,
Mm,
and I've got new hires that I've never really gotten to train.
mm.
And now I'm watching my daughter fight for her life. And, when they came back and they told me that it was a ruptured brain aneurysm and not meningitis from the CAT scan, then they were transferring us to Emory Neuro ICU immediately. I
Mm.
knew brain, so I knew bad, but I had no idea what that really meant. And,
Yeah.
we get to Emory. And, she's got a drain coming out of her brain. She's hooked up and center lines all in her arms. And and we're in the middle of COVID, so everybody's freaked out. They're not allowing visitors into the
Yeah.
hospital. They had to
Oh,
allow me to come in because she was a minor. And we're in there, and it felt like I was in prison all over again because
oh
I'm
no.
quarantined to this little room with her. There's no private bathroom. They're denying me access to a shower. And yes,
Did you have to
and
stay there the entire time, like day and night?
6 weeks.
What about your son?
He was with his father,
Okay.
and that was hard because he had never been away from me for longer than
Mm.
4 nights, and so, it was a very difficult
It's like the
time.
universe keeps wanting to give you these really difficult challenges.
Yes, yes. So
Oh,
here I am. I've got customers calling my phone.
yeah.
I've got reps calling my
Mm,
phone. I'm updating people via Facebook and Instagram about Madison. And, we had people all over the world praying for her in many different religions and, just reaching out. And I remember they ended up giving me access to a shower because I literally
thank
lost my
God.
mind in there.
Yeah.
Right. But the third night that were in there, I finally had went to sleep for the first time. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. They come in, they wake me up, and they say she's showing signs of a stroke. Now,
Mm.
if she would have had a stroke, it would have killed her, or she would have been a
Oh,
vegetable for the rest of her life. So I
oh my
walk out into her room and I witness it. She's tremoring, she's slurring.
God.
They rush her out to go do a CAT scan. And I went into that little small room where I was sleeping in this chair, and I just slammed the door and I screamed to the top of my
Mm.
lungs, "Why are you doing this? I've
Yeah.
had enough." And they brought her back in, and the signs of the stroke had disappeared. She was normal for where we were at in that moment. And I remember her holding my hand, and she's asked me, "Am I going to die?" And I couldn't say no because I
Mm.
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And once she went to sleep, I FaceTimed my mom that night and I said, "If I have to sit in here and watch her die alone, I will die with her." And my mom was like, "You can't. You have another
Mm-mm.
child. You have to
Yeah.
live for. Like
Yeah.
you've got to be strong." And so I started to reflect that night, and I realized that when I screamed out to God, to the universe, whatever you want to call it, when I screamed out and she came back normal, it occurred to me, this is not about her brain. This is
Mm.
about fixing a relationship and a fracture that was much too deep a wound for a person, a therapist. No one could fix it, not even us. And so for 6 weeks of uninterrupted time, I got to know my daughter on a level that most parents will never know their children.
Oh my goodness.
And it repaired our relationship.
Wow, what a
Yeah.
blessing in disguise.
Yes.
So what did you spend time talking, just getting really intimate together?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
talking, eating, we binge watched The Vampire Diaries. People would send us in food and we'd order
Oh,
Uber Eats. And,
yeah.
and I didn't get to leave. The only time that I left her room was when I walked across the hospital for my shower at night. But
Mm.
outside of that, it was just me and her
That
with,
really is the silver lining.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, you walk out of that, and if you see her today, a year later, you'd never know she went through any of it. She's,
So she was on the road to recovery after that. The stroke didn't happen.
yep.
And so is she okay now?
She is okay. So once we got in there, they actually found another aneurysm that did not rupture, and so she's actually got two. They coiled the one that ruptured.
Okay.
She will likely have to go in for a cranial clamping surgery at some
Mhm.
point in the near future. We did go to an angiogram appointment in the last couple of months, and her brain looked fine. But because she's so young, they do want to go in and clamp them to give her the best possible chance of life.
So she otherwise can function
Oh,
normally,
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
learn normally.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I
that's
mean, if you
amazing.
looked at her, you would not know, and then they had shaved her head where they had put the drain in her brain, her hair's grown back out. Everybody knows because it was such a talked about thing.
Yeah.
She had these bracelets, "Pray for Maddie," the hashtags all over the place,
Aw.
and so, I mean, it was a big thing. There were so many people that just poured out love to us, and it was
Yeah.
very uplifting because in a situation like that, you just feel so alone, but
Yeah.
people that I didn't even know were sending us, gift cards.
Oh, that's
Her
beautiful.
friends had created a GoFundMe account for her.
Yeah.
And, it was just a very powerful time in our lives. And even though it was detrimental, it was healing at the end
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
at the end, something really beautiful came out
Yes.
of it. And that's
Yes.
going to carry forward in a very positive way for the rest of your life. So now
Yes.
she has this story of
Hmm.
overcoming
Yes.
as
She
well. It's a
does.
pretty big one.
It is, and she
Yeah.
actually told her story with her youth group at Buckhead Church, several months ago. She got up and she kinda did her little first round of public speaking, but it's been a
Aw.
very powerful thing, and so once we got out of the hospital, I went back to work, and,
Yeah.
I went back into my company, and it was successful from a number standpoint.
Mm.
But I felt like my life was spiraling
Mhm.
and that I couldn't really get control of anything much because I was still trying to overcome the emotions in my life that I had
Catch
the
up. Yeah.
yeah, because, in a situation like that, one thing that I learned at a very young age is how to go into survival mode and not
Yeah.
allow yourself to feel.
Absolutely. I know what that is like. I lived in survival
Yes.
mode for so much of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was there, and so I'm in survival mode, and I never really allowed myself to go through what I went through with her, and
Mm.
I'm back at work, and we're working, and I'm just getting every day, and I'm going through the motions, and we're hitting the numbers, and, but I still just struggled to get out of bed some days because it was hard.
Yeah.
And so I went, I go through that and I had been dating someone new and found out that I was having a child. And I always wanted another child.
A third child?
A third child.
Wow.
Yes, and it was another little boy, and I always wanted another little boy, and so it was an exciting time, and, I had found out that there was a little boy, and I was going to my 12-week appointment, and then I found out that there was no heartbeat,
Oh,
and so
Jennifer.
yeah, so I
Mm.
go and that was, the weekend, right it was the Thursday before Mother's Day of this year.
Of this year.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
So
so I
very
go
fresh. Yeah.
yeah, and so I go in there, I'm 12 and a half weeks and there's no
Mm.
heartbeat, and so they're like, "Well, we can perform a DNC, but that's not gonna happen for until, like, 2 weeks," and I'm like, "I'm not gonna walk around with my dead child in my body
Yeah.
for the next 2 weeks," I just couldn't do it. I was just torn open from the inside, and, um, they prescribed me a pill to take that would cause my body to abort the baby,
Okay.
and
Oh,
yeah, so I got Madison off to prom on that Friday, and I came home, and I start taking this pill, and on Saturday, I begin to miscarry, and, the baby I pass the child, and it comes out looking like a little baby,
oh no.
and then I hemorrhaged after that, and
Mhm.
so I drive myself to the hospital. I didn't think it was a big deal. I knew I was hemorrhaging. I had called the doctor. She's like, "Sounds like you're hemorrhaging. Just come in." But when I got into the hospital and they put a mask on me, my blood pressure tanked, my heart rate goes sky high. I start throwing up. I lose control of my body functions. I lost a lot of blood, and
And
in
this was
the
due to
hemorrhaging,
hemorrhaging.
hemorrhaging,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And, in that moment, it made me realize, like, if I were to die in this moment right here, because that's the number one cause of death in women from a miscarriage is hemorrhaging.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yes, and I was just thinking to myself, like, if I were to die in this moment, like, I don't feel like I've really lived my life.
Mm,
I have a successful career. There would be
mhm,
tons of people at my funeral that said I had impacted their lives in a positive way, but I never really felt like I lived for me, that I
mm,
enjoyed my life. And
mm.
so after they had to perform an emergency DNC and I went home and I was
What's a DNC? Pardon me, I'm not familiar with this
so
term.
a DNC is where they basically take a vacuum and they go in and they suck everything out.
Oh.
And so my placenta had ruptured in the miscarriage, which caused the hemorrhage. So they had to go in there and get it all out.
Oh, like a
Yes.
cleaning, gotcha, okay,
Yes. So they
yeah.
did that. And I was on bed rest for a week. And I remember going home and I didn't get out of bed for like 7 days. I was so depressed, and it was
Yeah,
the survival mode vault that I stuffed
mm,
everything in my entire life. When that happened, it blew the lid off of that, and I felt every emotion in my life that I had never allowed myself to feel.
mm,
And I cried, and I'm not a crier. I never really ever cried, but I cried and I cried and I cried, and I became desperate to heal. And so
mm,
I went on a healing journey, and that's when I went, did the inner child healing session, and I got intentional once again about, if I remove the titles, the companies, the prison reform influencing, if
mhm,
I take away all of these labels and all of these things that society sees me as,
mhm,
who am I? Like,
yeah.
if none of those things exist, who
Yeah.
is Jennifer
That's
Rogers?
that's very interesting because to get to that point, you had let all these external things kind of drive you, right?
Yep.
Like, okay, I'm going to challenge myself to have a great career. I'm going to be the best I can be. I'm going to get my daughter back. I'm going to do all these external things. Not that they didn't matter. Obviously, they
Mhm.
did. But that still was leaving you feeling like you still were unfulfilled to some
Yes.
degree.
Yes, and it was like I had
And
this
and you
place. It's like I had this place in my mind that if the world could
mhm,
be on fire around me, and I could literally just go to
mhm.
that place and I would have no emotion, no reaction. I would feel nothing. We could be in the most chaotic situation and I would be the calmest person in the room.
Mm, mm,
And it's like,
mm.
that's just trauma. It's just you living
Yeah,
in you've gotten so comfortable with living with your trauma that
yeah.
it's so normal to you that you think that, like, I remember at a time in my life, I would tell people my story and they were like, "You have a phenomenal story." And I was like, "It's just my life." Like,
Right.
it
Nope, no
doesn't,
biggie.
yeah, it's like I
I lived
did,
it.
like, right, like it's no big deal,
I saw that
Um,
movie real time.
right. And so
Yeah.
you get to this place, and especially as women, because what I learned through all that is that we house our trauma in our wombs. And
Really?
yes, yes.
Interesting.
So I did a womb healing ceremony, where I asked for the trauma in my womb to be released.
Mm,
And, I went through a journey, and in that journey, I found me and I found peace, and I walked away totally different. And just, even I saw a girlfriend of mine for the first time in like a year or two the other day, and she took one look at me and she's like, what have you been
mm.
doing? She was like, you just look so light. And I was like, I am. I am. And, so in the midst of all of that, when that happens, when I lost the baby, I decided to put my companies on hold.
Mm.
And I just walked away from everything, and I was fortunate enough that I had, done enough financially so that I could take that time to do
That's really
that.
important, by the way. Anyone
Yes.
watching or listening right now, setting yourself up for financial independence and also just
Yes.
having a buffer is so empowering because
Yes.
it allows you to take these times of rest that are really, really important. Sometimes it might be a break between jobs. Give
Mhm.
yourself 2 to 3 months to really just be
Yes.
be with your thoughts, be with your feelings without all the hustle and bustle of the 9 to 5, sitting in traffic, picking up the kids, doing this, the weekends, trying to get in a tiny little bit of self care if you can. It is so nice to have that buffer and giving yourself that time of peace and what would you call that? Revival,
Mhm.
refreshment. It is so important. So it may take a little work, but having that goal, I don't know if that's something you did,
Mhm.
Jennifer, but something I made an effort to do a long time ago was always make sure you have enough in savings that you can take a break if you need to.
Right. And I was never the type of person to take a break. Like I was a workaholic. That was my new outlet. And,
Yeah.
and I'd never just done one thing. Even when I was a bench craft and I had a cheer gym, I was doing network marketing. I would always have several different streams of sales income coming through and many different outlets. And so I was always busy, busy, busy. But
Hmm.
when you busy yourself, you don't have time to have to think or feel or reflect on
That's
your own
right.
life.
No time at all. Yeah.
None, and I liked it that way. So
Hmm.
when that happened and I decided to take a step away from everything, in the midst of that now, I had filled out and for this contract with the government.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so you had to apply for it, and they would award whoever they ended up selecting. And so I filled that out, and I just kind of always believed in my heart. Actually, I didn't kind of. I believed in my heart that I was going to win that contract.
I love
So
that you're saying this again. I want to bring
yes,
attention to this because it's so important. If
yes,
you believe it and you know it, it
yes.
actually does affect the outcome.
It does. Belief is powerful. Your words are powerful. That's why
Yeah.
it's so important, even when talking about yourself, that you don't negative self talk, because
Mhm.
you become your words and your thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I took that time and I struggled for a little while. Even in my relationship, I remember asking him, "Are you still as attracted to me?" Because when you
Mm.
met me, I was running 2 companies. I'm also a real estate agent. I had real estate deals going on. I had all of these things going on, and now I have nothing
Yeah.
going on. Like, are you
Yeah.
still attracted to me? Because
Yeah.
I felt unattractive without
Mm.
those things, because I had created my identity in those
So that's
things
that
for so
external
long.
thing, right? These external
Yes.
factors making up your identity and also providing you with this sense of value and worth.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's
Um,
really important to bring attention to because in the end, it really, when you really look at it, it's not who you are.
no.
And that's why it's unfulfilling.
Yeah. It's just what you do.
That's right.
It's just what you do. And
Yeah.
so, I went through that phase, but then once I found peace, I remember my dad saying to me one time, he's like, I'm just worried about you because, a couple years ago, like a year ago, or when you were running your companies, you were so motivated and you were doing all of these things. And,
Mhm.
now it just seems like you're just sitting at home, not doing anything. I said, listen, don't worry about me. I
Yeah.
said, because I haven't lost my motivation. I said,
Mm.
but what I want you to understand, when I was working primarily for that first company, I said, I was miserable. They
Mhm.
treated me terrible. And I might have been making a lot of money at that company. I said, but I came home and didn't want to talk to my children at night. I was like,
Mm.
so don't worry about me, because when the right opportunity comes and I feel moved in my heart, in my soul, in my spirit to move in a direction, then I will. But I am saying no at this point further to anything that doesn't raise
Mm.
my vibration,
Mm.
that doesn't bring me in more alignment with what I believe spiritually, that
Yeah.
doesn't give me joy, that doesn't give me peace. And if it doesn't fit in those buckets, I am saying no to it.
Good
It's
for
like,
you.
yes, so don't worry about me. I haven't lost motivation. I've
Mhm.
lost motivation for the wrong things that are clearly motivated by money, and that is it.
Mhm. And that aren't serving you. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and so not long after that, I found out that, my partner and I were awarded the speaking
Oh, that
contract.
had to have been an amazing
Oh
feeling.
my gosh, it was, because it was like everything, it all led to this moment, all
Yeah.
the hard time, all the loss, all the pain, all the suffering, the years in prison, like my life brought me to this moment. And it's so ironic, because when I was in prison, I believed that I would be doing this one day. And there was a lady that came in. Her name is Katie Souza, I believe is how you say her last name. She wrote a book called The Captivity Series. And I
Okay.
read that book. And she actually came into the prison right before I left. And I was held in there an extra 6 weeks, and I was mad about it. But then she ends up coming in, and she says to me, God spoke to me about you, and you're going to get out, and your life is going to take off, and you will never be back. And one day you will get your daughter back, and she will never remember a day that you lost with her. And I left on that high note, and literally everything that she said come to pass. But I remember in that moment thinking to myself, one day I'm going to be a Katie Souza.
Oh, I love
And
that.
so now I'm literally standing in front of these women in federal prison as Jennifer Rogers, telling the Jennifer Rogers story and giving them
Mm,
hope and transformation. And, when I'm up there talking, I mean, these women, they cry and they laugh and they cheer. And I know that I have left them with something that says, you know what? I am worthy
yeah.
of
You
this
have
life.
you have had made so many mistakes,
Hmm.
have had to learn so many lessons like all of us,
Hmm.
and that makes you relatable. That is your power.
Yep.
Overcoming those mistakes, overcoming those, and maybe you saw them as mistakes, and maybe you can look back and go, you know what, these were just lessons I had to learn. It's
Hmm.
all perspective, but
Hmm.
you didn't let any of those stories hold you back. You
Right.
own them, and you didn't let it make you feel less worthy. And I think that's so empowering. And you bring that message to those that you serve, and you get to see the looks in their eyes. You get to see
Hmm.
the change happen within them. And that's got to just feel so good.
It does. It does. I mean, it is a dream. I literally am living out one of my dreams right now. And it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to wake up every day and say, you know what? Like, yes, I have a hard life. I have a sad story, but everybody has a sad story.
Yeah.
It's what
Yeah.
are you going to do with it to turn it into a victory, to turn it into a message, to
Yeah.
turn it into hope. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. If you've went through something hard in your life, there is someone else out there going through that same thing that might live another day because
Yeah.
they hear that you made it.
So powerful, Jennifer.
Mhm.
Yes, absolutely. So, is there
Mhm.
anything that you are doing beyond that? That any like what? How can people find you, connect with you? Is there anything that you're offering them besides the
Yes.
speaking that you're doing as well? Okay, okay. Tell us
Yes.
about it.
So there are a couple things. One, I am a motivational speaker, obviously, so anybody can book me for speakings. But I have this new thing coming out. So remember when I talked about the advertising that I was
Yeah,
doing and
yeah, yeah,
that?
yeah.
So I actually have a brand new course coming out, and basically, it's called the Up Business System. And what I did was I took all of my years of experience in creating, $1 million company and creating this national advertising brand, and I took it all and I boxed it together, and I created a course that's going to teach anybody how to do the same business from home and be your own boss and work for yourself. And I'm giving all of my proprietary knowledge, my contracts, everything. So I've packaged it
Wow.
up. Yeah. So, and I'm doing that as a way because I know with the climate of the world that we're living
Mm,
in right now, we all knew what it felt like in the pandemic, especially for people that weren't sure how they were going to feed their families,
yeah,
that were without jobs. Like, we're living in a time when it is so important to be able to know that I don't have to go to college.
yeah,
Even if I didn't graduate high
yeah.
school, even if I'm just getting out of prison, even if I'm a convicted felon, whatever
Mhm.
even I'm a single mom, I don't know
Yeah,
how, all of these things.
yep.
Anybody can do this from the comfort of their own home with no background in any of it. And I am literally walking you through step by step and teaching you from start to finish how to have this business, how to
Oh,
make $8,900 minimum a month part
whoa,
time.
that's huge.
Yes, part-time, and then if you wanna keep it going and scale it, I literally I laid it all on the table on what it took for me to learn how to grow $1 million brand, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I learned from those, and so I am giving the blueprint of my business, and I'm selling it, on with this online course that's gonna launch right before Christmas,
Okay,
and
so right now, as we're recording, this is late November.
yep,
So right after Christmas, 2021.
yep,
So going into 2022, of course, anyone can access this on your website. What is
yep.
going to be the website?
The website is going to be jenniferrogersacademy.com.
Okay.
It'll also go under upbusinesssystem.com.
Mm.
Now, it'll be on both of them, and they'll probably be pointing towards each other.
Mhm.
And so if you go on my Instagram, though, that's where I'll have it linked in on my Instagram also,
Perfect.
which
What's
is,
your Instagram handle
yep,
again?
it is the_Jennifer_Rogers.
The one and only.
Yes. And I post I post a lot of content on there about my life and my
Awesome.
personal life and my kids and the prisons. And so it's I don't just use it as my business page. It's my life. And so go on there and follow me. I'd love to follow you back. And all of that information will be on there during the holiday season.
Amazing,
Mhm.
Jennifer. You are such an
Thank you.
inspiration. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing everything that you shared with us today. I know your story is going to continue to inspire so many other amazing women who have their own powerful stories to tell about their life. And I can't wait to hear them. So hopefully you'll connect with both Jennifer and I on social media. We would definitely love to hear your story. So please share them with us as well. And yeah, Jennifer, thanks so much for coming on today.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. I really have enjoyed this.
Wow, Jennifer's story is just mind blowing. I can truly say I've never met anybody like Jennifer in my life. I hope you were able to get some great inspiration from today's show. Hey, if we're not connected on social media, I would love to connect with you there. I'm all over the place. You'll find me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook at Jenna Banks .0. LinkedIn, just type in my name, Jenna Banks. Please also connect with me, sign up for my newsletter on my website. I love sharing lots of great, helpful tips and information, and also updates on my upcoming book, which is titled I Love Me More. It's how to find happiness and success through self-love. And I would love to keep you updated on all of that. So if you sign up for my newsletter on my website, that'll keep you posted on everything. My website is Jenna-Banks. If you enjoyed the show today, don't forget to hit that subscribe button now. I have so much more to share with you in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And remember, your love is your power. Until next time.